when we look at other people, we focus on how we're different, right? We focus on how we're different. And that does something very different to our interactions and very different to our system of judgments and opinions. And really, in this chapter, what he's offering up is the idea that, again, is very common in yogic texts, that we're all the same. We're all the same, regardless of everything else, all of the other details. We're all the same, and that we all want to be free from suffering, and we all want to be happy, right? And so when it comes down to it, in the end, that's true for every living person on the planet, every living being on the planet. That drives all of our actions, really, if you think about it. It's this sort of, those are the main drives for self-preservation, okay? And then we act in ways that we think are going to help us achieve those things. So what would it be like to be able to really feel an authentic compassion and kindness towards everyone in the world, right? Because we notice and we know that everyone just wants to be free from suffering, just like me. That's why they're doing what they're doing. No matter what my opinions are about how they're doing that, that's why they're doing what they're doing. They want to be happy, just like me, which is why they're doing what they're doing, regardless of what my opinion is about what they're doing. All right. And if you can allow yourself to just come back to that, it makes it a lot easier to empathize with people and to have compassion for people, and ultimately really just to be kind to them, to be kind to them. And being kind is good for us. It's good for your own heart. Working with these ideas, when you stretch yourself, right, to increase your circle of concern, that allows you to grow the soft-heartedness that you have, right, to expand your capacity for soft-heartedness. And then that flows over in so many beautiful and wonderful ways into your close circle. You're able to be more open and available to those around you. You're able to be more caring and understanding when there are differences. So I think if we remember one thing for this week, it will be that, how often can we remember we're all the same? We're all the same, just like that. And then as we know that, and as we try to stay in that mindset and that state of being and that state of awareness, then we venture out into the world with unilateral virtue, which is what Kathleen brought up at the beginning, right? That's how he ended the chapter. And, he sort of presents the idea in the context of, him doing couples counseling and things like that, right? So the example that he uses is, you have a strained marriage, and, the one person is saying, well, I need this from you. And the other person says, well, I need this from you. And then the other person says, well, I want you to give me this. And they say, well, fine, I'll give you that when you give me this, right? And then you're kind of in a stalemate. So, in how many different ways do we do that? And, what I'm thinking of when I'm reading this chapter right now in the context of our sort of global experience is, how does this idea of unilateral virtue apply to everything that we do, every way that we interact, every conversation that we have? Because if we wait for the world to change so that we feel vindicated, or we feel, like it deserves us being nice to it, it's not going to change, then we're just in the same cycle. That's what the cycle is, So we have the power to change the cycle. Okay. Cycles are just patterns that are repeating over and over and over and over again. And the patterns repeat because we're doing the same things, all the time. They might have slightly different flavors. So if we decide that we want things to be different, then the question is, where's my power? And how do I take unilateral steps to contribute in positive ways to my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my boss, my relationship with my community, and my relationship with the world. You know, even if you're not directly verbally communicating with the rest of humanity, you are having an ongoing conversation with them right now in your mind every time you watch the news. Every time you look at your Facebook feed and you have a judgment about what you're seeing, right? What somebody else is doing and why they're doing it, and what you think about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and if they're right or if they're wrong, right? And then I think a lot of times in that context, it's actually easier for us to feel disempowered. It may not be as intense in the same way as, you know, somebody that you're sharing a house with, but it feels so large. You know, it feels so large that you can feel kind of disempowered. And it's so always coming back to like, where's my power and what can I do? What is my responsibility? And then from there, if you are meeting your responsibilities, then that's all you really can do. You know, you can't change other people's minds. You can't make somebody think something different. You live by example, is what I would say. Okay, you live by example. And the way that we all set a good example, and then we change the world because of the way the world comes to us, the way that we experience the world. We encourage people to behave better by behaving better, right? You know, somebody's got to hold that space. So this is really for me, what, you know, what a lot of the chapter could definitely relate to right now. So you can sort of apply it to, you know, wherever you are, but I would encourage you, as, you know, as we're going about the next couple of days and weeks and months and, you know, hopefully not years, but, you know, who knows, right? Just remember, we're all the same. We're all the same, and we're just all trying not to suffer, and we're trying to be happy. And what can I do to contribute to alleviating the suffering of the world, alleviating the suffering that I'm experiencing, alleviating the suffering of the people around me, and to contribute to happiness in some way? But one of the things that I like that I want to close with are that he gives really tangible steps. Okay, so how do I successfully live unilaterally? Because that's the question, right? It's especially the question if you're feeling strained, you know, like if you're feeling not happy and you're trying to take the steps to remedy that, okay? How do you successfully accomplish that when you decide, I'm going to take responsibility for what I'm responsible for, and I'm going to take action, positive action based on that? So the first thing, which isn't technically part of the steps, but you have to do before you do the steps, is you have to figure out who you are, right? Do you guys remember that he was talking about that? Who am I? What am I doing here? And what do I think a virtuous life looks like? Okay. And in the context of Erin, right? In the context of insert your name, what does that look like? What is my path here? You know, holding this line of kindness, tenderheartedness, compassion, empathy, responsibility. And so you might decide to sort of write a story about that for yourself, you know, sit down and do it. I can tell you it's a really powerful exercise. Dan and I'll just tell it. Do you care if I tell a little personal story? You don't care, right? It's entertaining at least, right? Care. Do you care? It's not about you, though. Just kidding. It's not about you. I won't tell Dan's personal stories. He can do that himself. But what we were talking about the other day, because I was recently, I've done a bunch of interviews for like professional interviews, and Dan was listening to one of them that just got posted, or one of them that I just recorded the other day, where, you know, I was just talking about, you know, a little bit about myself and about my spiritual, you know, practices and life philosophies and how I got where I am and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, when he listened to it, he said at the end, he's like, gosh, you know, I'm really surprised and happy to hear how easily you share all of that, those things that I used to protect really closely, right? Like I used to sort of segment the pieces of myself to sort of protect them, really, because there is fear around judgment, right? Fear around what other people would think or what they would say. And I went through a very deliberate process at one point, because I recognized that all the ways that we fragment ourselves, right? All the ways I was fragmenting myself was making me unhappy, right? And I wasn't really being effective, because you can't really be fully autonomous when you're segmented that way, when you're fractured. So I'm bringing it up because the process that I went through is basically exactly what he's describing in a certain way. It's deciding, who am I? What do I stand for? And what does that look like in the world? Okay. And then once you've sort of written all of that down, like, who am I and who do I want to be? Who do I want to be in this world? And then you just decide what that looks like, and you decide to do it. And you decide that it's okay, right? And once you accept that part of yourself, right? And once you sort of put those pieces together, it's much easier to stand in that space and to be autonomous, and then to, go out and act unilaterally, right? Because you're less affected by other people's opinions, you're less affected by the dramas that are going on around you. So I would just offer that as a really helpful exercise that you guys might want to consider doing if you haven't before. And it's helpful to kind of redo it, because we change and we grow all the time, right? But just to write down, who am I and who do I want to be, and how do I become that? How do I be that? And then you act that way regardless, because that's your truth. He's really talking about standing in your truth, the truth of who you are and what you're here to do, and how you can serve the world with that. And everybody, that's going to look a little bit different. So when he talks about, I don't remember really how he words it, but when he talks about sort of figuring out your ethics, I think maybe is the word that he uses, or your virtues, and how you think that you should act, or what a person that was acting virtuous would do, then you can implement these next steps that he sort of tops off the chapter with. Okay. Does anybody, before we go through those last couple steps, have any questions or comments or thoughts about those ideas?
And I just want to say, for me, it's very comforting, because I always looked at being kind as being as a weakness.
Yeah.
And then when I find out it's more of a power, it just is very comforting to me. So I'm free to be kind.
Yeah. I would say that the biggest strength that anybody could ever have and be able to express is kindness. Look what's going on around us. It takes a lot of strength and conviction and clarity to be able to act with kindness amidst all the chaos that's going on. And that's really what the world is calling us to do. That's our best gift, is if we can figure out what that means for us.